We have an incredible board who's been extremely supportive of the Public Defender's Office, and board members and other political individuals who believe in the vision of holistic defense. And I can also say that our justice partners, from probation to the sheriff's department to our district attorney's office, all are very supportive of where we're going. We have limited resources, however. Our county has limited resources, but building on what Robin said, if you go back and you look at the data in regard to the number of children we in Santa Barbara County have in foster care that are as a result of criminal justice involvement of a parent, it would shock you. And it's a problem that we all want to address. So, where the vision is, gosh, I'm going to be presenting here in April and June again and asking for more money. Sorry for the board members who may be here, but I will, because I think it's meaningfully impactful to our community. But we're a long way away. I mean, even in the best models, and there's like Robin's, the gold standard, of course, or in Oklahoma, what Lemire and Robin have done together there. We're all resource poor, so we're a long way away still.
Okay, any additional words of wisdom about this question, the resource limitations facing full implementation? Everyone's really excited about addressing that one, I can see. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. What is the role of the public? How can we make a difference?
Wow. So we all have a role in this, and I think that role is by talking about it. And talking about it passionately. I have been in a lot of rooms with a lot of people, and what happens is people sort of do that murmur thing. If something happens and they get inspired and they're like, murmur, 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 murmur. Yeah, right. And then they walk out of the room, and after they've left with the other people that they were in that room with, the murmurs all die. Whew. And I've attacked the poor microphone. The murmurs all die. And what we need is for those murmurs to keep going. We need those murmurs to be the ripple in the pool or the lake or the ocean that create larger and larger waves. So every time that I came to these things, or Robin or Tracy or Erica or Gabriella, and the murmur continued, so that when you went home, you told your families, and when you went to your other organizations, you said, there's this great thing, and that kept going and going and building. Because I don't know about you all, I have these friends, I have people that are like, I heard this thing the other day. And that passes the information around, because we all have different connections. We all have different people that we touch, or different networks that we can get to. And we never know who's listening. The thing that I have found and have really embraced is I never know who's listening to me at all times, which causes a mild amount of paranoia for me. But also, when I'm excited about something and I want to talk about it and I can get it into somebody's ear, I never know where that's going. I've gotten phone calls so many different times from some random judge in some place that said, I talked to a friend of mine who talked to my hairdresser who told me about this thing that you said. And I say, oh, really? That's fascinating. I had no idea. And so then we get to talk about it. And the thing is that by doing that, it just becomes normal. Right now, there's all this shock and awe. They're like, oh, no. As Robin was talking about the different stats, or Erica, Gabriella, folks went, oh, no. And we need the oh no to get to everybody else, because then that inspires people to make the oh no, that thing in the past that happened. And that's what we want. We want those waves to build and to crash into the system, so that we have decarcerated all the women, or we have created just scads and scads of successful women that can walk around and smile hand in hand with their children.
Thank you. Anyone else before we open it up? Okay, so this is your chance to ask questions. We actually have a mic that is operating right here if you want to come up and ask your question. This presentation is being videotaped, so this is a way that we can, I see people would much rather just talk from their seats. All right, got it. So I saw the first hand over here, I think. Go ahead.
So I'll say a few things, because that is a data point that's specific out of Santa Barbara, but I think Robin can also partner with this question, is the power of having social workers, highly skilled and trained, such as Erica and Shane and other social workers that are in this room right now, who are working with the clients, is that we are able to tell a deeper, richer narrative, of that specific person, often which is neglected and unseen in our courtrooms. And unfortunately, we still have a hard time getting a lot of our women clients out, even with those rich narratives that we try to tell. And so I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but our ability to tell those stories are really meaningful, and also to be able to give that roadmap to the court to say, these are the things that we are helping this individual with to break down those barriers. So I don't know, Robin, what
Look, I think at its core, Holistic Defense is able to provide more information to systems players, right? So that's not necessarily gonna get you over the hump with some judges, but judges are trying to make good decisions, or a lot of them are. And they can't make good decisions if they don't have a lot of information. And the way you bring that information to them is by providing other advocates in the team with the client, with whom the client can build trusting relationships. Who wouldn't trust these women, right? And talk to them and allow them into their lives so that we can bring those stories to judges and provide, opportunities to talk about what kinds of supports women need rather than being held in jail, right? Who their family members are, who their children are, how they're being impacted. And the more information judges have, I think the more likely they are to engage in some other form of disposition of a case other than the dumb, blunt instrument of our criminal legal system in jail, which is the sort of default. When you have no information and there's nothing else available to you, you just go, okay, I'll give her time served in 30 days. If somebody is able to step in and say, here's the background, here's the story, here's what we know, here's what we can do, here's the services we can provide, and the roadmap we can create, I think judges, and I'm not a judge, so I don't want to speak for the judges, I know there's a judge or two in the room, judges are more likely to make decisions that will enable people to go home to their communities and to their families. I mean, I will say the thing, which is judges should be braver. They're only going to be braver when something goes wrong, that they don't get called on the carpet and they don't wind up in the front page of the newspaper. That is only going to happen when we all, as the public, stop pointing fingers at each other and recognize that it's not always going to go well and we're not always going to get it right and it's not always going to be perfect. But you don't legislate around the exception, right? And you don't create policy around the exception. And you don't practice around the exception. We all understand exceptions are going to happen, but most of the time things are going to go far better if you let people out of jail, women out of jail, to go back to their communities with their families than if you hold them in jail, where 100% the research is very clear. Not only will they be affected physically and emotionally, and their health will deteriorate, and their children will suffer, right? But they're going to be 30% more likely to commit another crime when they get out than have been free all along. I didn't make those numbers up. That's data that came long before me. So embolden judges, embolden DAs, hold them accountable, know who you're voting for, right? Start a court watch program and go sit in a part and watch what judges do when they're setting bail, or when they should be setting bail or not setting bail, and watch what happens, right?
Right, and
become part of this.
And what I would suggest, and I do believe very strongly in this, is that you can go into any of our criminal courtrooms or public arenas and go into our Raymond courtrooms and see the pressures that the public defender's office is under, the court is under, the court staff is under, to manage the volume of cases. And I just want to share one story and why this is so important, that we have early representation and that we meet with clients early and get narratives that are important. About 2 weeks ago, we had a mother of 3 who was homeless, no criminal record, had been a victim of domestic violence, a daughter had been a victim of sexual violence, who was arrested for truancy because she couldn't get her kids to school in that scenario. Because Erica got involved right away, because one of my lawyers identified the issues, we were able to go in front of that judge and make a pitch, and that young woman was back with her children and is now looking at a very different circumstance. Now, that would not have happened if we didn't have Erica, thanks to you. That would not have happened, and she's one of our clients, that would not have happened if this program isn't funded, and that's the meaningful impact you can make.
I also think two things take place with our communication with the clients. First is we really explain to them what's going on in their court proceeding. They have no idea. If you've been to arraignment court, you may have 35 seconds sometimes to speak for yourself. It's overwhelming. It's scary. You're wearing a jumpsuit that's not yours, shoes that aren't yours. You don't know who you are. So we really take time to explain what is the process. We really empower them through education. The second is we talk to them about, where do you want to go? The judge says you need to go get sober, but what does this look like for you? Where do you need to be? We don't just give them a punch card and say, here, go out into this street and go do this and then come back and then 30 days. Like, where do you want to go? Where have you been? What is calling you right now? Let's try to find a place for you that really speaks to you. So when you're looking for sobriety, when you're looking for parenting classes, when you're looking for other kind of counseling, we're going to find something that matches you. Erica was talking about a client who she went and we interviewed 2 or 3 different therapists. We want to make this successful, but we're going to have to put some time into it to make it a good match, so then therefore our clients are successful. This is that relationship, and this is that time where it takes. We're actually kind of working with our clients one-on-one. Thank you.
Wow, good question. Okay, I did see a hand over here before. Go ahead.
How is it determined which defendants will qualify for this holistic defense program? Who makes that decision?
How is it determined which clients will qualify for the holistic defense program here in Santa Barbara County? You're asking that question? Yes. Okay.
Right, so I'll answer that just really quickly. When we started the grant, it was a randomized study, and so people were selected randomly so we could have the data that we have. And that was, I think, probably with the RAND study too. Here, currently, for holistic defense, my lawyers make a referral. For our women's grant, we are getting specific referrals for women who are then engaged in our program that we're working with in relationship to this grant. But otherwise, it's a referral. The lawyer meets with the client and says, I think this person needs an advocate. But again, we only have 6 social workers, and we handle, Deepak, how many cases a year? 15,000 plus? Yeah, so we have a lot of clients that are coming through that are not getting these services. I don't know if Robin can talk about what it was in the Bronx or even what it's in She Rises, what the ratio between social worker and.
Yeah, I can say in Tulsa the ratio is still not wonderful. I mean, it's something that we're growing. We have 1 social worker and now 3 advocates. And have lots of cases with lots of need. And that's one of the things that we've actually struggled with is how do you make sure that there is nothing at play in who gets the services, which is horrible, right? Even just having to say that sentence out loud is horrifying for me, because it should be, and we want to grow so that we have all the resources that anybody who comes in has advocates that they need, has the support that they need, and that's what we will continue to push for. And as it is now, we do something very similar. Somebody talks, if one of the attorneys meets with somebody and talks to them and says, hey, this is somebody who has needs, whether they're mental health needs, housing needs, whether they are looking at some point in the case, a long prison sentence and need support for that or for their family to be as successful as they can be, knowing that there's going to be a long-term separation. And then we try to interact and make sure that those needs are served.
Okay, next question. All right, we're just going to go back and forth, so go ahead.
How long after adjudication is the client follow? I guess specifically here in Santa Barbara, I guess I'd ask how much funding time beyond.
So I answered that question. So holistic defense is different everywhere, and there are models where the advocates will follow the clients forever, it's a lifelong relationship. That is not, unfortunately, our model. It would be the ideal model to build those lifelong relationships, to assist and be part of this person's new connection and family within our community. So for us, our advocacy structure right now is we have one full-time benefited social worker that works within our office. everyone else who's in our office is related to grant funding. So when that grant funding runs out, those my social workers that are in the office that are grant funded, that if that funding does not get re-extended or turned into a permanent stream, those social workers will not be part of our office.
Okay, yes.
First of all, thank you for what you're doing. It's really inspirational. I'm sure in your jobs you determine some areas that you think could help prevent people from getting into the criminal justice system in the first place. I know there's not an easy answer to this, but I'd like to hear some of your own opinions about how we could prevent it from happening in the first place. That's a very good question.
So the question is, how do we prevent this from happening instead of responding to it after it occurs?
I mean, you want me to go out there? I'll go out there, but look, we have over-criminalized almost everything, right? We have decided that the way that we're going to deal with public health issues and issues of poverty and race and lack of social infrastructure is we're going to have the criminal legal system solve all the problems. That is what led to mass incarceration. It is what mass incarceration has, what's resulted. So I think we need to really reassess the expansion of criminalizing things that should be treated outside the system. And that may sound like a big ask. I mean, I personally would start with looking at, possession of drugs as a public health matter, not as a criminal matter. You would get most women out of the system that way, and you'd get a whole lot of men out of the system that way. And to really invest in communities to be able to deal with those problems. And I'm not talking about somebody who commits a violent crime as a result of that. I'm talking about people, literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people come through the system who have drugs on their person. And I'm not a fan of drugs. I'm not, but I also recognize that the criminal justice system can't deal with it, has not dealt with it, it hasn't been effective, it's been kind of a disaster. It's been a disaster for low-income communities and low-income communities of color in particular. And so that's a good place to start, right? To just start to begin to move the public health question and the public health lens on what we are now criminalizing and move them out of the system so we can focus on the other cases.
Okay, yes.
I'm just curious, this is a fabulous program, obviously, and we're all women, so the topic has been women. Is there anything in Santa Barbara or the Bronx that deals with men? Do they get the same kind of holistic thing?
So in the Bronx, 98% of our clients are men. So they're getting holistic defense of the Bronx Defenders. We created Still She Rises because we thought there were unique issues that we needed to look at, and we wanted to really be able to turn a very specific lens on women in particular. And it's why holistic defense is being provided to women in Tulsa at Still She Rises. But holistic defense should be provided to everybody that comes in the criminal legal system. It's just starting with women makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, particularly the intergenerational nature of what happens.
Right, and from Santa Barbara's perspective, most of our social workers are working with male defendants. That's just a reality. So most of them have that clientele. Erica's just working because of you and this women's grant, but we're working with mostly men.
Question over here.
Looks like you have one over there.
Okay.
There's a lot of very talented women in the Women's Fund. Is there other ways, other than just money, that people can contribute?
Well, there's a ton. One, by being voices in the community and talking about this. Two, I personally think one of the most important things that is happening nationwide that is showing success dealing with the most complicated individuals in our criminal justice involved population is peer navigation and people being involved within the community. And quite frankly, I think that's extremely important, and being a voice. I mean, I know we talked about the Bail Project, but if you're not reading about SB 10, and I want to do this pitch because it's going to be on the legislature, it's going to be voted by each of you, you should be reading about it because that is one of the most monumental pieces of legislation that is a game changer in our community. So,
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing I just wanted to point out is, sometimes it's easy for people to sit back and to think, well, this doesn't really impact me. or does it impact my family? And so I have two things to say about that and why we can be sitting around kitchen tables talking about this and should be talking about this all the time. Number one, what our criminal legal system looks like reflects on every single one of us. It is the place that houses our values as Americans. And if our values as Americans look like our criminal legal system, then we are in seriously, seriously bad shape. It is, you cannot possibly go to criminal court and sit in the back of a courtroom if you have not done it. I beg you. Your perspective will never be the same. And so that's number one, is that it implicates all of us. Number two is a new statistic that came out last year that I just want everybody to sit with for a second, right? Because I sit in lots of rooms with people who think, well, it's not really me, it's this, it's that. So 1 out of 2 American families, 1 out of 2 American families have had an immediate family member booked into a jail in this country. So you may think it doesn't impact you, and it's certainly the weight of this system has been borne on communities of color and low-income communities, but as we have criminalized more and more, that weight of the system is weighing on far more of us, so the chances are that somebody sitting in front of you or sitting behind you or next to you in this room has been impacted by the criminal legal system as well, or somebody in their family. And that should make everybody pay attention.
Go ahead.
Well, also, too, if there's any women out there who are therapists, who like to do pro bono work, we have plenty of clients, especially therapists who have experience with trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse. We are desperately needing community providers who can do this work for pro bono. So if there's anybody out there, my name's on the program. I'd love to work with you and connect you with our clients, not only here in Santa Barbara, but Lompoc, Santa Maria. We are desperately in need of really excellent therapists. Thank you. And there's a sign-up list back there too.
The other thing I wanted to add is that, we've been talking about going into court and watching and that sort of thing. But what I would really love to see is that if you go into court, that you make time to walk up and introduce yourself to the judge or to the prosecutor who's in the room and say that you're hanging out and you're watching on purpose and who you're with. It's amazing. And then we could chart that data on what happens when you're in the courtroom. There is seriously an idea that in the system, no one's paying attention. And so people can act any old kind of way they want to because no one's really watching. And so there is something to be said to walk up and say, hey, I'm watching. No one else may be, but I am. So.
Thank you. We had a question. Yes, go ahead.
Do you have a need for interpreters?
Yes, we do. There's court interpreters that go through a system, but certainly from an advocate standpoint as a public defender, not all of my advocates speak Spanish or Mixteco or some of the languages that we deal with. So, from my perspective, yes, please call us.
There was a question. Yes.
So I have 2 questions, if I may. One is, I'm the state senator for this area and have been since 2012. And in 2013, I learned that we still practiced eugenics here in California, particularly for women who are in prison and without their knowledge or consent were the victims of sterilization. We passed a law that now prohibits that. I wonder, are there any other states in the country where we are seeing eugenics still practiced, particularly on young women of color who have need of some kind of health services while they're in prison, being sterilized without their knowledge?
I don't know. This is not an issue that I know about. I'm a little speechless and horrified. I think we're all sitting here going, what?
It's a little shocking, but
It's, yeah.
women who are vulnerable, they frequently have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
At any rate, that was my first question. My second question
Yeah.
is, we now have in California the woman who is our first, I think, Surgeon General. And one of her big issues is child trauma. There's a name for it.
ACEs, yeah.
I'm wondering if, recognizing that a lot of the common threads that these women in particular experience is related to child trauma, and perhaps men as well, do you see this as being a bit of a game changer, and how would you incorporate this research and understanding that this is a motivator potentially for criminal behavior? How would you handle that in your work?
I
can speak to that. So ACEs is something that we talk about quite frequently.
I might just say that ACEs is Adverse Childhood Experiences. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so absolutely, we definitely talk about ACEs in the work that we do. It has been very helpful to do the ACEs survey with clients, and I can tell you, you know, most often the clients that I work with are like 12 out of 10. Like it's out of a 10 based scale, 1 to 10. And so generally our clients are like off the charts with the trauma that they've experienced as children. And so, you know, oftentimes in the reports that we're writing, we actually are including that information. And then to counter that, you know, we talk about resilience, because that's, you know, the solution, if you will, to trauma is building resilience in people, and, you know, doing resiliency scales with our clients to help develop that, to help develop resiliency within people. But yes, absolutely, we are looking at trauma. I was just thinking today about, you know, the women that I'm working with right now in the grant, and it is just, you know, the trauma that some of these women have endured is unspeakable, unthinkable, horrendous, absolutely horrendous trauma that, you know, is horrible, you know. And so, you know, oftentimes by the time they come to me, you know, I have attorneys, sometimes male attorneys, who are coming to me and saying, oh my goodness, I think I just opened a wound by, you know, by trying to get information about the case or the history or the facts of the case. And they realize that they need a social worker on the case to hold space for some of the trauma that is coming out. And so oftentimes, I would say I have a number of cases right now with the women that we're working with who, you know, we've identified this trauma, we've identified childhood sexual trafficking, physical, sexual abuse, and sometimes even torture. And so, you know, just identifying what that is, holding a space for it, and then, you know, urgently connecting them to the trauma therapist to get them the, you know, the supports that they need to be able to live. Because oftentimes what happens is, you know, the women that we work with have been, you know, so victimized, and if someone approaches you in a way that you're not comfortable with, you react. You may try to protect yourself or defend yourself by even maybe pushing someone away, and then you get a charge. You receive a charge for that, and then you're in the legal system, and then you may have to, you know, relive this trauma publicly.
I want to add something, though. First of all, Senator Jackson, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you be attending this. This question is very important. ACEs is a game changer, in my opinion. But where it needs to be the biggest game changer, and I say this with all due respect to, you know, my partners in justice, which is it has to be something that the district attorney's office is more sensitive to. It has to be something our bench officers have to be more sensitive to. That this educational component and tool is very, very powerful, but it falls on deaf ears often because you're talking a story about a woman who's been victimized, and we're trying to convince a bench officer or the DA to dismiss a charge or to go down a different path.
Thank you for your questions. We are just about at our out of time. Is it a quick one? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in our community, we're a very caring community. Is there a group that has organized or is working towards this goal
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly that the long-term goal here is systemic change, and long-term systemic change that's thoughtful and nuanced and complex and really like digs deep into what these issues are and what some of the solutions are. I think there are lots and lots of organizations around the country, you would know better locally, that are trying to move systemic reform forward. I mean, we laugh at the Bail Project, which is our goal is to put ourselves out of business. We're about to go out of business in New York because we finally passed groundbreaking legislation that's taking effect on January 1st, and nobody will be held in on cash bail anymore. So we get to get out and go home. And that's the goal, right? I agree. That's the goal. The local organizations that are doing that, you would probably know better, but there are many, many groups doing systemic reform and litigation. And I have to say also, there's policy, there's systemic sort of litigation, there's also ground-up grassroots organizing efforts. All of those things have to be happening at the same time. It's not going to just work if you have one lawsuit or what. You have to have all of those things operating, and so you might have a better resource about who's doing that locally.
Yeah, I can say we don't have a big local imprint as far as the criminal justice reform movement, although we have a very active board. We have actually, and again, it's unusual for a public defender to sing the praises of law enforcement agencies, but we have some really good people at the top on all of those agencies that are actively engaged in these discussions. And so we're in a unique position in Santa Barbara over the next few years to really impact change and meaningful change.
So, okay, will everybody be okay with staying like 2 extra minutes? Okay, this is our last question right here. Oh, okay. Okay.
Having another education forum, and it's about ACEs. About Earth Resiliency on October 29th at the New Vic, free, and it's going to be fabulous. And
Yes.
more information. It's 3 of the agencies that we have granted money to this past year.
Thank you. So let's have a round of applause for our panelists. And on behalf of the Santa Barbara Public Defender and FSA, thank you very much for the grant. You can see what a difference a grant like this makes. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Mickey for closing comments.
First of all, I'd like to extend my thanks to our truly inspirational panel for your passionate work to improve our criminal justice system. And for me, you are role models about how women coming together can truly make a difference. So thank you so much. Then I'd also thank the wonderful audience. So the public service announcements come now. For follow-up questions or to schedule a visit with Family Services Agency, on the back of your program is Gabriella's contact information, so please reach out to her, and she would love to talk with you more about this and show you more about Family Services Agency. I also want to thank the Grants in Action Committee for their assistance in putting this all together. And then, as she said, if you were inspired today, you can still sign up for the Adversity to Resiliency Supporting Children and Families, which will be at the New Vic on October 29th. Specifically learn about ACEs and what different organizations in town are doing for regarding ACEs. You can send an email to rsvp@SantaBarbaraWomen'sFund.org, and we look forward to seeing you there. I also want to thank Carol McElhaney for sponsoring all of these grants and actions. She covered all of the costs for all of these site visits, so we're very fortunate to have people like that in our fund. Please remember to renew your membership so that we can continue to change lives together in 2020. And then finally, personally, I would like to urge each of you to please share and talk about what you heard and learned here today. Sybil, where did my Sybil walked out? But I need to, oh, there she's talking. I'm talking to Sybil. Yay, Sybil! Sybil, you and I need to get together. Maybe we need to get a group of women and go and sit once a week in the back of the courthouse. Maybe that's just how we're going to start. Women's voices are powerful. And let's please continue to use our voices and our Women's Fund grants to change lives together. Thank you so very much.